There's a highly lucrative, entirely unspoken economy operating in the dark, unlit shadows of professional basketball. It has nothing to do with official team salaries and nothing to do with collective bargaining agreements. This is a massive multimillion-dollar shadow economy fueled by proximity, leverage, and global visibility. It is an economy controlled by the unprecedented economic gravity of one single athlete and one veteran role player who just executed what might be the greatest corporate heist in WNBA history. She did not do it by demanding maximum salary from a general manager, and she did not do it by winning MVP or leading the league in scoring. She did it by weaponizing association, leverage, and visibility. Welcome back to WNBA Pro, where we do not deal in front office PR narratives or polite media spin. We deal in the cold reality of corporate leverage and boardroom mathematics. To understand what is really happening, you have to look at professional sports the way corporate executives look at it, not as a game, but as a multi-billion-dollar industry driven by power, branding, and market control. Every move on the court is a business decision. Every endorsement is a corporate partnership. Every locker room alliance is political strategy. And right now, the Indiana Fever locker room is the most valuable real estate in women's basketball. To understand how this financial empire was built, you have to rewind the timeline. When Sophie Cunningham was traded to the Indiana Fever, she did not arrive with the expectation of becoming the primary scorer or the franchise star. She arrived with a calculated business strategy. She understood that every camera, every sponsor, every media network in the world would be focused on Indiana because of Caitlyn Clark. She understood that proximity to that level of global attention dramatically increases personal brand value. When you align yourself with the biggest audience in the sport, your visibility multiplies, and with visibility comes sponsorships, marketing deals, and media opportunities. But proximity alone is not enough. To secure that position, you have to prove loyalty and value to the franchise and to the league's biggest asset. This became very clear during the highly physical Connecticut Sun matchup. The opposing team used an extremely aggressive defensive strategy against Caitlyn Clark, attempting to bully and intimidate the rookie star. The entire basketball world was watching to see how Indiana would respond internally. In that moment, Sophie Cunningham did not hesitate. She stepped directly into the conflict and openly defended her teammate, sending a very clear message to everyone watching. The franchise player would not stand alone. That moment was not just a basketball moment. It was a business decision, a branding moment, and a loyalty statement broadcast to the entire sports industry. In professional sports, reputation, visibility, and alignment with star power can sometimes be worth far more than points per game or box score statistics.
We already know how they give it up, okay? They ambushed and attacked Caitlyn Clark. Sophie Cunningham stepped in, and that is part of the reason why we love her. And then it just so happens that at Connecticut, another dirty play happens from Bria Hartley, and it ends Sophie.
Listen carefully to the undeniable strategic brilliance of that specific moment of physical retaliation. If you analyze it with the cold precision of a marketing executive operating in the brutal world of professional sports, that moment was far bigger than a simple on-court altercation. In old-school basketball culture, that role is known as paying the enforcer tax, protecting the star player at all costs. But in the modern, highly monetized attention economy, that moment functioned as the ultimate viral marketing campaign. One single act of very public, very visible loyalty triggered massive algorithmic exposure across social media platforms, and the results were immediate and measurable. Her personal follower count skyrocketed almost overnight, pushing her into the highly coveted 1 million follower tier. The global fan base of Caitlyn Clark immediately embraced Sophie Cunningham as a protector of their favorite star. Fans rewarded that visible loyalty with enormous digital engagement, likes, shares, highlights, interviews, and media attention. In the modern sports business world, digital engagement is not just popularity, it is currency. Engagement converts directly into sponsorships, endorsements, brand partnerships, podcast appearances, merchandise sales, and long-term media opportunities. In corporate terms, her personal brand valuation increased dramatically from a single televised moment. What makes this situation even more strategic is the timing. This massive surge in digital leverage arrived at the exact perfect moment in her financial timeline, because her contract situation was approaching expiration. Up until that point, she had been playing on a heavily restricted one-year veteran minimum contract. The total guaranteed money on that deal was roughly around $100,000, a relatively small number in professional sports, especially for a player receiving national television exposure and playing a visible role on a team like the Indiana Fever. From a business perspective, that meant her market value and her salary were completely disconnected. But then the entire financial landscape of the WNBA began to change. The newly negotiated collective bargaining structure and growing media deals started to push salaries, marketing opportunities, and revenue growth upward. This meant that digital popularity, brand visibility, and marketability suddenly became even more important in contract negotiations than traditional statistics alone. In modern professional sports, the players who control attention often gain leverage faster than the players who only produce numbers on the court. In simple corporate terms, she transformed herself from a role player with a small contract into a highly marketable personality with a rapidly growing audience, and that dramatically changes negotiating power, sponsorship potential, and long-term earnings. That is why that single moment on the court was not just about basketball, toughness, or team loyalty. It was about leverage, visibility, timing, and positioning in a rapidly growing sports business economy.
With the Fever ended, and with the WNBA reaching a new collective bargaining agreement in mid-March, Cunningham is in line for a massive pay raise when free agency begins next month. That's definitely something you got to pay attention to, because Sophie Cunningham is going to get a bag.
Listen to the sheer financial impact of the open market reality now in front of Sophie Cunningham. Her previous $100,000 contract has officially expired, and she is now an unrestricted free agent entering a market that suddenly has far more money, far more media attention, and far more corporate interest than at any previous point in league history. The salary structure in the WNBA has been rising, team valuations are increasing, and franchises are beginning to understand the real value of marketable personalities, not just box score production. That puts her in a very different negotiating position than she was in just 1 year ago. From a purely mathematical and business perspective, she is now positioned to negotiate a significantly larger contract, especially with a franchise like the Indiana Fever, where media exposure, national broadcasts, and sponsorship opportunities are significantly higher than most teams in the league. She understands the off-court value she brings: media attention, fan engagement, merchandise visibility, interviews, and social media traffic, all of which contribute to the overall franchise brand value. In modern sports economics, franchises are not just paying for points and rebounds anymore. They are paying for attention, visibility, and brand expansion. But instead of simply waiting for the general manager to offer a new contract, she appears to be building leverage in a different way, through media exposure, branding, and outside corporate relationships. Modern athletes increasingly make far more money from endorsements, appearances, podcasts, media deals, and brand partnerships than from league salaries alone. If an athlete builds a large audience and strong public identity, corporate sponsors often become the real source of long-term wealth. This is why what looks like a simple media appearance or podcast interview on the surface can actually be much bigger from a business perspective. Media exposure increases personal brand value. Brand value attracts sponsors. Sponsors bring endorsement money, and endorsement money reduces dependence on team salary. In modern professional sports, the most financially successful athletes are often not the ones with the biggest contracts, but the ones with the biggest audiences and the strongest personal brands. In other words, the real game is no longer just being played on the basketball court. It is being played in media studios, marketing departments, sponsorship meetings, and social media platforms. Contracts still matter, but attention, branding, and corporate partnerships can sometimes matter even more in the long run.
It is almost that time for March Madness. We are so excited to be teaming up with Marriott Bonvoy for Live from the Bracket. It is a 4-episode limited series edition of our podcast, Show Me Something.
It's going to be sick. We're going to talk to special guests about all things travel, all things basketball.
So
Now we need to critically analyze the sheer corporate magnitude of that specific partnership involving Sophie Cunningham. She recently announced a multi-episode podcast sponsorship with Marriott Bonvoy, which is part of the global hospitality giant Marriott International. This is not a small local endorsement or a basic social media advertisement. This is a highly produced, heavily funded travel and basketball content series titled Live from the Bracket. When a multinational corporation like Marriott invests in content partnerships, they are not just paying for a name. They are investing in audience reach, brand alignment, and long-term marketing value. This type of corporate partnership is usually reserved for top-tier superstars, Olympic athletes, or MVP-level players with massive global recognition. On the basketball court, Sophie Cunningham is not an MVP-level superstar in the traditional statistical sense. She is a high-energy role player who contributes shooting, defense, and intensity. But what she clearly understands is her exact position in the modern sport economy. She understood the value of proximity to a global star, the value of visibility, and the value of brand personality. By aligning herself closely with Caitlyn Clark and the massive attention surrounding the Indiana Fever, she dramatically increased her own market visibility. What she effectively executed was a proximity multiplier strategy. She did not need to become the franchise player to benefit from franchise-level attention. Instead, she filled a very specific and very valuable role: support the star, play hard, be visible, build a personality, engage with fans, and then monetize the attention through media and corporate partnerships. In the modern sports business world, attention is often more valuable than statistics, and personality is often more marketable than efficiency ratings. However, this success story creates a very complicated situation for the Indiana front office and for the WNBA overall. Once one player proves that this financial blueprint works, build visibility, align with star power, grow social media, secure corporate sponsors, and then enter free agency with leverage, other players will notice. And right now, a large portion of the league is approaching free agency under a new financial structure, new media deals, and increased sponsorship interest. This means many players across the league may now look at Indiana not just as a basketball destination, but as an economic opportunity, a place where media exposure, endorsements, and brand growth are significantly higher than elsewhere. From a business perspective, that can create internal salary pressure, roster competition, and difficult financial decisions for the general manager, because players will not just be negotiating based on performance anymore. They will be negotiating based on visibility, marketability, and brand value. In modern professional sports, teams are no longer just managing rosters. They are managing ecosystems of brands, personalities, media attention, and corporate relationships. And when one player successfully demonstrates a new financial blueprint, the entire league eventually tries to follow it.